first, before we start, just to let you know, just as we've been doing, we will record today's session for anyone who wasn't able to attend. So I think we can go ahead and start that recording. Again, I've been thanking you, and I'd like to thank you one more time for joining us for this last session of our summer series on building inclusive teams. If you weren't able to join us for one of the other sessions, you can view those recordings by visiting our website, which I'll show you again here in just a moment. Also, I feel like I should side note, I have a feline coworker joining me today, so if there's any unusual noises, just know that that's where that's coming from. The links to the recordings for the previous sessions should have also been included in the follow-up email that you received last week. It seems like we've been having some difficulties with our emails getting through various filters or something like that. So I apologize for any difficulties you've had in getting all that information, but I hope everyone's sorted out now. Just as a note, you'll have until July 13th, Monday, July 13th, to submit both your vision statement and your action plan in order to receive the professional growth points. So that'll give you a little bit of cushion around the holiday to be able to submit both of those things. If you have any questions about that, you can email me or Heidi. We're also super excited to announce that we will be developing a series of 3 follow-up sessions during this upcoming school year so that we can continue to support you as you begin to apply everything that you've learned through this series. And more information about that will be coming up here at the end. We'll touch on that a bit more. Okay, just as a reminder, this is our website, projectsuccessindiana.com. And when you click on resources up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll be able to get to all of the resources on our website, but especially everything we've been talking about during this training series can be found in the regional training section in that drop-down by selecting Summer Institute 2020 and clicking Go. That'll have all the session recordings, all the pre-activities, all the templates we've been discussing. And again, if you ever have any trouble accessing those things, our email addresses are included here that you can reach out to us, and we'd be happy to help you. Again, one more time, this is our team here. As a reminder, I'm Ashley Quick, and my co-presenter today is Heidi Brett Baker. And we have the other members of the Project Success team on the line as well to answer any questions you have in the chat box. So feel free, either technical or content related questions, feel free to put those in the chat box. So today, looking at session 3, first I want to remind you, anytime you see that symbol there in the corner, that means we're going to be referring to or referencing back to in your engagement guide. So if you don't have that in front of you but would like to go grab it, now's the time. It would also probably be helpful for you to have the inclusive framework document in front of you as a reference as well. So the agenda today, we're going to briefly review the pre-activities that you did for today, and then we'll close out the framework. We'll look at a few steps here of securing small wins, reflecting, analyzing, and adjusting, and then setting the norm. And then when we get to the end of today, we'll have some time to wrap up and kind of reflect on the series as a whole and talk about what's next. The objectives for today will be primarily that you'll understand the importance of securing small wins when implementing your action plans, that you'll be able to define the critical elements of the reflection process, specifically as it relates to implementing your inclusive practices, and identify methods for ensuring that inclusive practices become the norm. So something different we're doing today. Our first 2 sessions were meant to be more informative. Today we're going to try to be a little more interactive after we share the remaining stages of the framework. So we're going to try using, if you have function, the raise hand function on your WebEx, when you see one of our purple slides, as you've been seeing through the last couple sessions, if you have something you'd like to share, if you raise your hand, click the raise hand icon. If you have If you don't have that icon, you can just tap yes in the chat box, and one of us will call on you and we'll be able to unmute, and you can just share and actually be able to engage with everyone that way. So clicking this, one, of course, to increase the engagement, but two, it's sort of a way to model for you of assessment in your virtual lessons. If that ends up being the direction that we go in the fall, we wanted to be able to sort of model for you some formative assessment in that way. Oh, I should say that icon there, circled in red, that's the raise hand icon. If you have that icon next to your name in the participant list, that means you can click on it to raise your hand. If you don't see that icon, it just means you have a different way of accessing the WebEx, which is totally fine. So if you do have something you want to share when we get to these purple discussion slides, just type yes in the chat box. We may not be able to call on everyone, but that will at least indicate to us that you have something you want to share on this slide. Okay. As a reminder, and sort of a brief overview here, we began exploring the inclusive practices framework by establishing the need for change. And the most important piece here was discussing the importance of presumed competence in all of our students, right, regardless of what we see on the surface. Then we reviewed the elements that make up an effective guiding team, such as having a variety of perspectives represented, establishing those team norms, and especially being intentional about regularly communicating with that team. And then we looked at the benefits of creating and sharing an inclusive vision. In our second session, we spent a lot of time discussing what makes a strong action plan for moving forward with inclusive practices. And that included assessing your current practices, reviewing additional inclusive strategies, and then specifically laying out some action steps and responsibilities for each team member. And again, today we'll be finishing out that framework by looking at securing small wins, reflecting, analyzing, and adjusting, and setting the norm. So our first question for today is, how do your current inclusive practices align with your vision statement? Remember, you can raise your hand if you'd like to unmute and share, or you can type yes in the chat box if you don't have that button. You can also just feel free to type your answers into the chat box as well. But how have you found that your current inclusive practices align with your vision statement? All right, we have a few people sharing in the chat box here. I'm not able to see the raised hands at this moment, so if one of my fearless team members could alert me to anyone who's raising their hand, we'll make sure to call on them as well. So how are your current inclusive practices aligning with your vision statement? Some people are saying it's getting there, or we still have some work to do. We have a good start, a work in progress. Just getting on board with full inclusion, so it's still a learning curve. Feel like we're on the right track. Yeah, I think the majority of people are likely kind of somewhere in that middle area, right? We, for the most part, have moved away from complete segregation or isolation, but a lot of us, I think I remember last time, or maybe in the first session, talking about maybe we're actually more in that integration stage, right? I remember that the evolution of inclusion where the kids are kind of in there, they're integrated, but they might not be fully included yet. So lots of work to do for the severe and moderate students. Yeah, there are some different things to think about when we get to students with even more complex needs, for sure. My school is all in for inclusion. It's just a matter of trying to work with the severe group. Students with complex needs are, I mean, that's what we focus on as Project Success. So yes, there's definitely some additional things to consider there for sure, but really it's the goal is no different. We want as much inclusion as possible because we know, and the research supports that it increases outcomes for all students regardless of the complexity of their disability. This is great feedback, thank you. continue to share your answers in the chat box if you'd like, but I'm going to go ahead and pop up our other question up here, which is, there we go. We'd be curious to hear your thoughts on your creation of your action plan that you worked on over this last week. Just general thoughts, experiences. What was it like for you? Is it something that you're used to doing, being, very intentional and structured about laying things out this way? Or was it an overwhelming experience? Did it give you some new things to think about? Was it easy? Was it laborious? Just talk to us about your experience with creating your action plan. It was interesting narrowing down objectives. I find that to be one of the hardest things to do. I'm the kind of person who wants to do all the things, all the time, all by myself, because I'm the best one to be able to do it. And of course, that's not practical. That's not functional. So being able to narrow down objectives and know that it's okay to narrow down your objectives because you'll have a higher likelihood of being successful that way. And then you can choose new objectives to work on once you've reached those first ones. That's really good, really good. Action plan was not too bad. Gen Ed teachers are not equipped to understand the specific learning disabilities and strategies. Yeah, there is oftentimes a big gap, right, between what special education teachers know and what Gen Ed teachers know. That's really why we talk a lot about the importance of collaborating between Gen Ed and special ed, not just within those sort of subcategories, but across those categories, because all teachers have knowledge and strengths in all kinds of areas. And so when you can combine those together, it really benefits all students. But it can be tricky, especially the timing piece, to be able to have time for all of that. But it's definitely a critical piece. Not having a team, it's almost impossible. In a small school, when everyone's stretched too far, it's hard to get a team to commit. Yeah, I mean, I get that, I do. And that is definitely going to be a time where I think some of what we talk about today with the securing small wins, again, it may not look on the surface like you're making miles and miles of progress, but if you can celebrate and sort of recognize the small pieces that you're able to implement and fit in, it's just a building on process, right? One after the other, little steps at a time. Yes, Krista. Excellent. All right. Keep on sharing. If you all still have some comments that you'd like to put there in the chat box, we'd love to still read them and hear about them. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Heidi now to start looking at our step 6 of the framework, securing small wins.
All right, good morning. Thank you everybody for sharing so far this morning. We are excited that you joined us back for the third time for this series. So you're going to go ahead and switch the slide, Ashley. We're going to be talking about our next step in our framework, and that is the securing the small wins. So as we wrap up our review of this inclusive practice today, one of the keys that we found to success is realizing that our big goals aren't going to happen overnight, right? This is a journey. This is not something that's just going to happen after a 3-part series, a summer series, right? We know that it's going to take some time. It's going to take months, sometimes years, but it's okay to realize that it's a journey and that working on this journey will be ever changing. Some things to think about for small wins. We tend to focus on end goals that are rather small, that rather than small or significant steps that take us to the goal. That's why it's important to acknowledge small wins. If we do this, it really helps our motivation. It helps us keep us motivated towards the long goal, and it really helps us to think about recircuiting our brain, because we know that when the reward center of our brain, that when we get small wins and it kind of releases chemicals to help us feel prideful, help us feel good about what's happening. It helps us celebrate the successes. It really helps us form habits. So why is it so important about securing wins? These habits help us to, like I said, help motivate others, help help motivate us into changing habits, changing those habits for classrooms, for whole schools, communities, districts. Also, the second thing, it helps individuals move towards the greater progress. It's all about us thinking about and understanding the importance of the present moment. We tend to take the present moment for granted. It seems sometimes insignificant, and we believe little things we do in the moment aren't really changing us or the students we work with. But when we invest in small things over time and understand that we only have a moment, that we only have the moment we're in, oftentimes these moments seem insignificant when determining whether you succeed or fall. But it's a combination of all the moments together that help us work towards achieving the journey of inclusive practice. We like this quote that's on this slide. Do not load up on vision, evidence, and a sense of urgency. Rather, give people new experiences and relatively non-threatening circumstances and build on it. We believe this is just a summary of this point, is that it's important to be mindful of not overloading yourself or your team members on this journey, especially if you are a small team, right? If there's only one of you, it's important to realize that you need to be celebrating those small wins. Thinking about those small wins will really help you push forward and help you keep the momentum going, rather than oftentimes when we don't realize those and we don't take a moment to be intentionally thinking about those, then we become discouraged, and then sometimes we then have to go back a couple of steps. So oftentimes, if we just intentionally pause a moment, celebrate, encourage others to celebrate, tell others about your celebrations, you get people on that momentum with you and on the journey with you to really help you want to move forward and gain motivation for others to join along. So how can we secure and celebrate these small wins? There's several ways you can do it. We've put a couple here down on the slide. One, display it all over. Once you have a vision statement and you have shared that with everybody, share it with people that come into your school. Put it on, on your letterhead, or make it visible in the building. Put it on top of every agenda when you're doing staff meetings. Make a school-wide event to really talk about the vision. Include it in your daily announcements. Talk about it when you sit down to an IEP meeting. This is the vision of our school. This is what we hope for it to look like. Display it everywhere that you can. 2, make it a practice that you refer to it at every meeting, every time you're talking, every time you go out into the community and you're sharing something about your school. Talk about the vision. State it so everybody knows what it is. Recognize those who embrace the vision. Some people like to be publicly recognized and say, good job. Others don't, but know that person and recognize those who are embracing the vision. Tell them thank you. Tell them what a good job that is, that they recognize the vision, that they're helping put it into practice. Hold yourself accountable. It's important for us when we're on this journey to be fulfilling what we wrote in that vision statement, right? And what we came to a consensus on, an agreement. So make sure you're holding yourself accountable to that vision and into your action plan. And last, most importantly right now, in this section that we're talking about, is to celebrate. Celebrate those small benchmarks, celebrate the large ones. Celebrate any progress that's made towards the vision, towards implementing inclusive practices in your school. All right, we have another question. We really want you to be engaged in this last series. So once again, if you have the raise hand, and somebody will call on you. If not, if you could just put something in the chat box, that would be great too. So what would small wins look like in your classroom or in your school? Gen Ed collaboration, that's a good one. Excellent one. Communicating our vision in a consistent manner. Yeah. Could you set up something to make sure that that happens? Maybe make a list of all the times it could be communicated. Co-teaching. The key thing right here, many people are saying, is that collaboration piece. Building culture. Gen Ed students taking ownership of all students. Having parent and administrative support. I love that last one, that helping Gen Ed realize that it's important and that it's possible. Oftentimes that is right, that when we talked about the very first step of our framework, that is the need for change, making people see the need for change and why things need to change. Recognize doing the little things, yes. Positive mindset. Kids learning new things. And kids are learning new things that they're exposed to that they've never been exposed to before. Having all students collaborate in class, definitely. Love this one. Bringing peers on board and helping them understand why the change and why we need to change. We talked about that, right? When building a team, peers could be a key component in building our team, right? We need them. We need them. They are important to us and they help us. And so they need to know. They need to know why we're changing. What is the new vision for your school, for your classroom? I love that. Parents saying how their children belong. So when we really think about sharing that vision and sharing the small wins, that should include parents. It should include the community. So I like this. It says in the hallway or at Kroger. It includes not just in your classroom, not just in the whole school, but it includes how does that generalize and spread to the whole entire community. Involvement of administrators. Absolutely. We need our administrators to be involved so that we can help lead the whole school. Allowing uniqueness, understanding that all kids don't fit in one box. Great. District-wide inclusion of all students, even students with most complex needs. Students developing real relationships with their peers. Yes. It's important that they have peer interaction, not just adult interaction. I would agree. All right. Well, you guys have a good many ideas of what small wins could look like to you in your classroom or to your schools. I'm sure there's many more that we haven't mentioned, but those are great ones. It could be, like many of you have said, administrators being on board, parents being on board, community members being on board, peers being on board, so students know what's going on. And the important thing is really to celebrate those, right? So that we can keep the momentum going towards that inclusive practice. All right, we are going to move on to what's next. Our next step of the framework is reflect, analyze, and adjust. And hand it back to Ashley.
The second to last step in the framework is one that you'll actually perform several times throughout the process of implementing inclusive practices. And this particular stage or step in the framework, it actually has 3 separate parts: the reflecting, the analyzing, and the adjusting. So we're going to talk about each of those individually. First, the reflecting. We talked about in session 2, in our last session, having the timeline for your reflection being built into your action plan. That was part of what we discussed about creating your action plan, was that you have to have that time set aside specifically and ahead of time. Otherwise, it's just too easy to get caught up in our schedules and say, oh, well, you know, we got to move on to this, or we got to, this, something else is more important. It's super important that you have that reflection time set aside ahead of time and stay committed to that, because it really is going to be informative to how your plan is progressing and what you can do to change it to make it better. You'll use the reflection time to think about where you started, where you've been, and where you are now. And then these guiding questions that you see here, they're in your engagement guide, and I would recommend referring to them during your reflection time as a way to structure your own personal reflection as you're thinking about your own actions compared to that action plan, but also when you're having team conversations, reflecting on how the action plan has been carried out so far. So how do you feel about your vision now that you've been implementing the action plan for a while? Does it still feel right to you? Is there something you might want to tweak or adjust in that way? What has been your level of commitment to the vision and to the process, both personally and as a team? Did it sound good in the beginning, but then you got busy and it kind of fell off? Do you need to recommit, or have you all been, you know, really pedal to the metal, making sure that you're staying true to the responsibilities that you had identified in your action plan? What have you observed about the level of commitment in others? And I would say that goes both for team members, but also, if you remember last time we talked about, there are going to be likely some people who aren't on your inclusive team who are also going to have responsibilities in sort of bringing this vision to life, right? So what have you observed about the level of commitment in those people? And then what can be done to address discrepancies in your plan versus what happened in reality? Is there something you can do to adjust? And that will be coming up next, right? But right now, this is when you're going to be reflecting on all of those things. So then what of that reflecting? You'll move on to the second step or stage or part of step 7 here, which is analyzing the results of your plan. You've thought about it now for a while, you've reflected, and now you're going to really analyze, okay, so what does that mean? That this is what we've discovered has been going on. So what are the events or the outcomes that have occurred that will require adjustments to address? Who's going to be responsible for making those adjustments? What additional information or resources are necessary to make those adjustments? I think that's key. It's one thing to be able to identify something that needs to change, but it's another thing to be specific and intentional about saying, and here's what I need in order to make that happen. And then who's going to be responsible for securing those resources and that information? So that is a pretty critical piece of this. The reflection is important to sort of gather up your ideas, but then it is also important to think through, okay, so now what about it? And then finally, what are you going to do about it? You're going to move on to sort of this adjusting piece. So if we consider the inclusive practices framework as a cycle here, this is all the steps of the framework, but I put them in a sort of a cycle format. You can see it's not a linear process. Sometimes the cycle is going to branch off in unexpected ways. So maybe when current staff leave or new staff join, you're going to find, you know, as you're reflecting and analyzing, that maybe you need to rebuild your team or add to your team or shuffle your team up in some way. Or it could be that as you are reflecting and analyzing and you adjust your plan, now you go back to that take action step again. Okay, we've made some adjustments and now it's time to act on those adjustments. Keep securing your small wins, reflect on it again, and maybe you just keep going around in that little circle for a while. But the important thing to know is that it is sort of cyclical and circular, right? It's not a step 1, step 2, step 3, we're done. We've achieved inclusion forever. Good job, everyone. It's definitely a cyclical and sort of circular process. When you're adjusting your plan, that automatically sort of means that there's going to be new actions required by at least some of the team members, or maybe some people who are outside the team. You're going to use the information that you sort of gathered in your reflection and your analysis portions, and then revisit the plan to update it and reflect those adjustments. As you get new information, even maybe as you get new students or new staff members, the needs within your classroom, your school, your district, they're going to change. And so as you see those needs start to change, and as you start to see the successes that you're having, your goals are going to change. And that means you're going to need to take another look at your action plan and make sure that the actions you're taking are aligned to those current needs and current situations. So, what are some things that would cause you, as you're thinking through the action plan that you created for yourself, whether it was for your classroom, your school, your district, what are some things that you can think of that would cause you to adjust your action plan? Like, whoa, we put this into place. This was a result. That's going to cause me to take another look at this again and make sure that we adjust something. Share with us in the chat box. You can try raising your hand, or you can just say yes and we'll unmute you. What would be sort of a flag that something needs to change in your plan? Yeah, just to clarify, if you need to clarify anything, that would cause adjustments. Having new staff members come on, the needs of students. If a portion of it's just not working, if you just flat out see that it's not working. Student needs, lots of student needs. Of course, that's the whole point of this, right? Is that we're responding to student needs and trying to give them what they need to be successful. And if that changes, then we also need to change what we're doing. Not enough collaboration. Yep. So if everyone's just rowing their own boat and not really getting anywhere, you might need to take another look at how you could change that. Parental input and recommendations. Absolutely. I think that's a key piece. To have feedback and input really from all stakeholders, right? That was something we talked about in the last session too, to think about, is there going to be a way that people who aren't on the inclusive team can provide feedback on how things are going? And then what are you going to do with that feedback? Lack of participation, too little action. Yeah, the commitment piece is going to be important here. Everyone on the team needs to be committed to the action plan. Yeah, a lot about new students, new needs, revised accommodations. Yep. I would say if we were doing this series before we had COVID in our lives, COVID would be a thing that would cause us to adjust our action plan, right? You may have had all the greatest plans in the world, and now everything has switched to virtual learning, or maybe it'll be hybrid learning in the fall, or whatever. But holy cow. And of course, that's probably not something that you could have planned for in advance. But wow, thinking about the impact of that and how that might completely change a plan that you would have had in place before. So yeah, yep. Collaboration is key in planning, and usually this gets forgotten. You're so right. Yeah, keep sharing if you have other ideas about things that you would be sort of flags for you to have to adjust your action plan. But you're exactly right. And the reason why I wanted to spend time talking about this in particular is so that you have those things in your mind, so that when you start to implement your action plan, you can be on the lookout for those things, right? And you'll say, I remember that was something that I thought, we're going to have to keep an eye on that. I might need to adjust something here. We might need to adjust something here. So I think it's helpful to just have them in mind ahead of time, so that you don't get overwhelmed by the day-to-day and then sort of either forget or lose sight of, that might be something we need to take a look at. I should say, you'll notice this one poor purple slide doesn't have the engagement guide icon on the bottom. I snuck that in as an extra discussion question, so that's why you won't see it in your engagement guide, if that was alarming to anyone. All right, let's check out the last step, the last stage in our framework. I'm going to turn it back over to Heidi for this.
Okay, so setting the norm, the new normal, as we've heard so many times in the last couple of days, right? That's such a key phrase that we keep hearing now, but we're talking about setting the norm for inclusive practices. And when we think about that, setting the norm refers to how the leader and the team set the stage for deeper implementation of the inclusive practice. So once you begin those first stages of implementation, those first practice of implementation, and those first stages become second nature to you and to your school, to your classroom, then you'll move on. You'll move on to the next set of practices and keep on working. You'll know that you've set the norm and things are changing when the norm starts affecting many things. A couple of things could be like your hiring process. When the interviewing team starts to talk about that is the norm in your school, inclusive practices, and you talk about that. When you are at IEP meetings and you talk about inclusion and about the inclusive practices in your school. Maybe perhaps when you are planning for the school environment or for things in the school day, the school schedule, and the first thing you talk about is inclusive practices. We know then that you're at set the norm stage of the framework, and that it is becoming the norm in your school. So let's talk about some of the things that move us from theory to practice in setting that norm. A couple examples here on this slide are, we know that it's becoming the norm in your school or your classroom when teachers use language that reflect the philosophy of inclusive education. Instead of saying your students or my students, it's our students, all students. So in a school district, instead of saying, special education students in the gen ed, it would be at Creek Elementary, all Creek Elementary students. And we talk about all students. Students with a wide range of needs and abilities are educated throughout the school. There's not any just self-contained classrooms, but students have a kind of a fluid flow throughout the school, and they are educated in different areas and in different classrooms. All students have the opportunity to participate in meaningful curriculum and instruction. That would include at grade level and with their peers. A range of curricular applications and modifications are offered to all learners. We're using UDL in every classroom so that all learners can benefit from using different modifications and different adaptations in the classroom. All teachers collaborate to address the needs of students with IEPs. We are making sure that there's effective instructional strategies so that we can really implement those strategies to help support diverse learners. And it's good practice for everybody. Another key thing from theory to practice would be that where there's great collaboration, and you guys have mentioned that many times today in the chat box when we're talking about things, the collaboration between special education teachers, gen ed teachers, paraprofessionals, related services, parents, administrators, when professionals are able to co-plan, co-teach together, collaborate on ideas on how to move forward, we know that then we're moving from theory to practice. We're helping others see what the norm is, what we want the norm, what the vision is for your school or for your classroom. Okay, go ahead and Ashley, go ahead and move the slide.
Before I go on, sorry, I just wanted to break in and say, I'm hearing that there may be a few hands raised.
Okay.
So if there's someone who has their hand raised, we would like to be able to call on them. Our project specialist, Mary, has been messaging you if you've raised your hand to say, is there something you want to share? We just wanted to make sure we didn't call out someone who wasn't ready to share. So if there's anyone who wants to share who has raised their hand, now's the time. Oh, Nick. Nick, did you want to share? Maybe not. Maybe not.
Okay.
That's okay. All right.
Continue to share in the chat if you don't feel comfortable unmuting or raising your hand, so that's fine too.
Absolutely. Just wanted to make sure we weren't overlooking those raised hands if they were indeed raised. All right, let's keep going.
Thank you. All right, So this slide you saw at the beginning in series 1. We talked about this slide. This is the evolution of inclusion. So what we want you to do now is think about where you are now. After you've processed the pre-activities that we've been talking about, you've maybe created your vision statement, you've begun to create your action plan, you have talked hopefully with colleagues and you've done some collaboration. This is in your engagement guide. If you could circle in your engagement guide, where do you think you are now in the continuum? And I'd ask you just to pause a moment and look at what you put in session 1 to session now, and tell us in the chat box, or if you raise your hand if you'd like, where is there a difference? Are you moved a little bit further on the continuum? Are you still at the same stage? Tell us your thoughts. Okay, because of COVID segregation. Yeah, we are in unprecedented times right now with COVID. Yeah, good point. Different kids and classes are in different stages. Some are hopeful, so that definitely you want to move further on the continuum as we go back to school, and whatever that looks like for the fall, right? That's a good point too. Mostly in inclusion in theory, but yet to see. So when you think about where you were, or even if you haven't changed, where you want to go, right, to the all the way to the right, think about what are some things that you have to do to see that change. What are some things you're going to put in your action plan so that you can move on the continuum of the evolution? Good. Some people have plans and hope that when they get back into the fall, that they'll be able to put those into practice. Some are worried about budget constraints. How to collaborate with more teachers to move that continuum. Yes, using more UDL and more co-teaching, that would definitely move us to where we want to be on that continuum. Constant collaboration, a consultation with all major stakeholders. How are you going to set that precedent? How are you going to set up that communication plan? Have you thought about the communication plan for the fall? How are you going to communicate? Make sure you put that in your action plan. Ashley says she would really encourage you to address as many barriers as possible. Think outside the box. And I think it's important, as you said here, we sit here and reflect on this, that we think about these things that we're identifying as barriers, right? That we are thinking about those as action steps. How do we get over that barrier? How do we break those barriers? And those become our action steps in our planning. How are we going to implement this inclusive framework? And how do we overcome the challenges that we're presented with? Good. Activities about integration, orientation material is about inclusion. Training other teachers to see the big picture. Great. Thank you. Continue to think about that when you are, when you're in the midst of your action plan, or you're in the midst of reflecting and readjusting, analyzing and readjusting. Look at this visual and think about, how do you overcome the challenges you've identified and make an action plan for that. All right, I'm going to send it back to Ashley for a couple of more things that she's going to talk about.
So I just wanted to say a couple more things before we get to the more formative assessment kind of wrap-up questions that we have planned here. The long story short, I would say, in all of this that we've been talking about across these 3 sessions, is that growth mindset, remember that idea of growth mindset we talked about in the beginning, it applies to us too. It's not just about students and trying to have a growth mindset for students. It's also about us. So just one example of that is, instead of having a fixed mindset of, I'm not ready to implement inclusive practices, it's too much for me, you can try to have the more growth mindset oriented, how can I get myself ready to implement inclusive practices? Or another example of fixed mindset might be, if we don't have the time for this, we don't have the money for this, we don't have the people for this. How can I find money for this? How can I find additional support for this? How can I, whatever? And maybe the answer is it's literally impossible, but I would venture to say that more often than not, and that's why I put that in the chat box, that to encourage you to be as creative as possible right now. If there was ever a time to think outside the box in trying to address barriers, now is it. If you have some kind of crazy idea about, well, we might be able to overcome, this barrier if we would do XYZ crazy thing, go for it. No one can look at you crazy now because it's COVID, right? Everything has blown up and is wild and unexpected. So if you have creative ideas about how to address these barriers, go for it. Really embrace that idea of the growth mindset. I really, really like this quote, and I think that it is a good way to sort of wrap up that idea, both for students and for adults. If you're tempted to say, I can't, have the courage to add yet. So if it's, I can't do this, add that yet on there. I can't do this yet. What is it that I need that's going to get me over that hump to be able to do it? This is something I say even to my own children. This is something I emphasized when I was still teaching. It's something that I think is applicable to all of us. Rather than stopping yourself short by saying, I can't, just add that yet on there, right? The power of just that one word sort of opens up room for there to be a possibility of addressing a barrier or being able to eventually get to that point. So I just think that was a really important point that I wanted to make there. Just an idea to keep in mind as we think through all the things that we've been sharing and discussing over the last 3 sessions, that this whole idea of growth mindset and being open to things, it's for students and it's for us too. So I'm going to turn it back over to Heidi for a couple questions, and then I think we will be ready to not wrap up fully, but wrap up in a way to look for what's coming up next. So Heidi, take it away.
Okay, so we have come to the part in our presentation where we really wanted to do a formative assessment with you and just kind of have you, we love so much that you've been engaged throughout our whole series and again today. So please continue to share in the chat box, or if you can, raise your hand and we can try to call on you. So what would indicate a need to establish change in your school or your district? So thinking back to framework step 1, where we talked about establishing the need for change, thinking about that needs assessment, thinking about your analysis that you did and what's happening in your schools. What were some of the things that you indicated there was a need for a change in your district or in your school? Students' needs not being met, okay? When you hear in the hallway, your kids. If there's no evidence of inclusive practice, right? Realizing you want more parent participation. Gen Ed teachers not wanting students with special needs in their room. Like this one, recognizing there's no growth. Looking at that data, right? And showing that there's not growth. Realizing that there was no parent input. Parents are our partners, guys. We really need to focus in on what our parents have to say, and they know our students. They know their children. They need to be a big part of our team. Reviewing data is essential. That is correct. Looking at that data, it's the evidence. It's the concrete of giving us what, and it shows us where we need to change, where we need to readjust. Presuming competence in all students. People not working together for student growth. Putting a plan into place so Gen Ed teachers have time to plan, right? So there's availability so that teachers and those key partners need to have planning time. Love that one. The need to give all students the same access to Gen Ed curriculum and support their needs. As we talked about that, all students have the right to access of curriculum. Helping our leaders, helping our administrators know about inclusive practices so that they can be the leaders that they need to be. Great. So everything you mentioned definitely are indicators. They're all things that when you think about assessing and seeing where you're at with inclusive practices, those are the things that indicate to us that this is the reason why we need to change our mindset, why we need to change how we are practicing for students with disabilities and without disabilities. Changing those expectations. Yep. Not having low expectations, changing them to high expectations. Helping others see the need to buy in. Talking about that data again, seeing that IEP goals are not being met. Why aren't they being met? Changing the mindset. Great. Lack of passion. Those are all they're unfortunate things, right? They're not good things to say that why we have to change our mindset, but they are. It is good that we are recognizing what they are and knowing where our challenges and our barriers lie and why we have to change so that we can establish more on that continuum of that inclusive practice that we talked about. Okay, let's move on to our next informative assessment question. So this refers back to our framework steps 3 and 4 when we talked about creating and sharing your vision. So think back to when you worked with your collaboration of your team or by yourself. We do recognize many did take this series by yourself, and hopefully that you've along the way contacted a colleague or your leader and to talk about how you can collaborate. But tell me or tell us, how does creating a vision support the implementation of inclusive practices? How did you, when you were working through that vision statement, how did that help you think about how you're going to support inclusive practice in the school? It gives everyone a common goal to work towards. Yep, it sets the stage, right? Gives us focus. Helps everybody join efforts together. Sends us in the right direction towards a common goal, to the end goal. I like that, a reference checkpoint. Sets the stage for success. Gets everybody on board. Holds everybody accountable. That's a good one, right? If everybody knows what the vision is and knows how the plan to get there, then we are able to hold others accountable. Helps us set goals and expectations. When I'm going to always bring it back to, so when you're thinking about that vision and sharing the vision, make sure that you've included that in your action plan, right? So that key of sharing that vision, so we can hold everybody accountable and we can get everybody on the same page. How are we going to share that out? How are you making that visible to all who it affects? It gives everybody a purpose, correct? Okay, let's move on to framework step 5 for our next question. All right, so why is assessing your current practices important to do before you write your action plan? So thinking about when we are assessing our practices, why is that important to do before we write an action plan? Sets the stage, gives everybody a starting point, gives you some baseline data, right? It helps us collect that data to see where we're at, where we'd like to go, and how do we get there. Make sure we don't leave anything out. To see, I think I like that to mark out what, to mark down what has already happened so we can see where we've changed. To see what's not working. We don't want to continue things that aren't working. To know where you've been, where you're going. To have a realistic view. You need a framework, definitely. We need to know what's working and what's not so we can make effective changes. Gives you a starting point, right? Gives us data. Data helps us make good plans. It helps us think about what's next and where we should go. What's the next direction? Right. Identifies our shortfalls and creates a better plan. Right. And I would also say that it also gives people who maybe weren't so involved in the process of in the guidance team or in the creation of the vision, that once people look at assess their current practices, it kind of gives them a time to reflect before they start writing the plan or helping write an action portion of the plan. It's a great self-reflection. Good. Yes. I also would encourage you, just like we talked about, that really that our framework is a cycle, that, you know, even after you start implementing your practices, we know we're going to reflect and adjust, but it might be good just to assess, use that assessment guide and do it again after you've implemented some of your practices to see where you lie and who else has a different viewpoint than you do, because it's great to kind of collaborate on that and see where, looking through a different lens, where you need to go as a school or as a district. All right, let's move on to framework step 7. Okay. So how many times should you reflect, analyze, and adjust as part of the process? Do you think there's a definitive answer for that? No, good. As often as necessary, every day, as many times as possible, unlimited, as needed. continuous, every few months, ongoing. Yep. I think there's so many variables in this, right? When we're thinking about it, it could be when you have new people come on board, when you have new students, when you have a new leader, when you have something like COVID happen, when there's an adjustment to your schedule, the school schedule. There's so many reasons why, right? Every day, some people say constantly, consistently. Yes. I think there are some that are just going to happen naturally, right? When you're reflecting and analyzing. But I also think in your action plan that you should write in there some definite dates when you're going to reflect and analyze and adjust. Because that way it's purposeful, it's intentional. We know when we do things purposeful and intentionally that it gives us time to really sit down and focus and reflect on that to adjust. But then other times it's just going to be a natural thing that, oh, I have a new student, or oh, there's a teacher that had to go on leave, and you have to reflect and analyze. But other times should be set times. Knowing that the time that we live in right now, that it seems like we'll be readjusting often until, unfortunately, COVID becomes our norm. Then we will, maybe be able to focus a little bit more on things happening consistently. But right now, I think with schedules up in the air still and what fall is going to look like, I think we have to be ready to readjust and analyze every day, or every couple times every week. I like that one. Reflecting and analyzing through different lenses would be happening all the time. Yeah. And that's why it's important that it's not just you reflecting and analyzing, not just the team. It would be maybe, getting a survey going at school. It could be maybe just having an exit survey, exit question when you meet with parents at IEP meetings or during parent conferences, to have some questions so that you can reflect and analyze all the time. And it would be looking through different lenses, through all the stakeholders, for all the key people on the team, or key stakeholders throughout the community and the building when talking about the inclusive practice. All right, well, I'm going to turn it back over to Ashley to wrap up where we've been and where we're going and what is next.
All right. Just like we've done in the other sessions, we're going to wrap up this session by taking a look at where we've been and where we're going. We made our way through the entire framework, and we're ready for you to share with us how we did. So not right this moment, but I want to draw your attention to it. The link down here is an evaluation of the entire training series, and you can either get to it by clicking on this link on the slides. It'll be posted on our website, and it'll be sent out in the follow-up email that is sent out later today. We really,
Ashley, can I just interrupt one moment there?
Of course.
Couple people in the chat box have said they still did not receive the email. Ashley made an announcement at the beginning. Please, if you are not receiving any of the follow-up emails, either email Ashley or myself, and we will send it individually to you. I think sometimes your firewalls are not letting us through some of our emails, so please send it directly to notification to either Ashley or myself, and we will send out the follow-up emails directly to you.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, I wondered at first if it was because the email was being sent out to so many recipients at once, and so the last time I did it, I broke it down into several groups to try to make fewer recipients, but even then I was still hearing from people who weren't getting it, so I can try to break it down even further to see if that helps. But yes, please, if you don't receive it by tomorrow, because the follow-up emails have been coming out the same day or the first thing in the morning the following day. If you don't receive it, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to forward the information to you. Thank you for pointing that out. So this evaluation form is going to give us feedback on the whole series, and we really do want to hear back from you, just like we did in the exit tickets about what was helpful, session by session. This is more looking at the series as a whole. We want to be able to continue this series moving forward, and we want to be able to do it as sort of effectively as possible. So and be able to support you too in the ways that you need. So it shouldn't take you too long, but it is going to be a little bit longer than the exit tickets that you saw. earlier, and we really would appreciate your feedback on that. So please be on the lookout for that. Now, as far as where we're going, I mentioned in the beginning that we're super excited to be working on a series of 3 follow-up sessions to support you as you begin implementing the things that you've learned throughout this series. We have the dates here blocked and ready to go for those 3 follow-up sessions. So September 8th, that'll give you just a little bit of time to get your school year started, but also not so much time will have passed between now and then that you'll forget everything. And then November will have given you a little more time to get things implemented, and then March will get you kind of set up for the rest of the year. If you registered for this training series, if you registered yourself with your own email address, you'll automatically be registered for the follow-up sessions. So, well, and you'll automatically get all the pertinent information about when, what time, the login information, and all of that. If you don't, well before the September 8th date, again, I would reach out just in case we're still having the email problems. But the idea would be that if you registered yourself with your email address, you'll be automatically registered for these follow-up sessions so that it just is one less thing on your plate. If you want to opt out of these additional sessions, you can just email me and we'll make sure to take your email address off of that list. If you were forwarded this information to join today or previous sessions, make sure that you register yourself under your own email address so that we can get a hold of you and contact you about these follow-up sessions. The link is there on this slide and it's still on our website as well. To click there and register. If you registered yourself already for this training, you don't need to sign up again. We just want to be super thorough to make sure we cover everyone. And again, if you want to opt out, just shoot me an email and let me know. But these sessions will be a great way for us to touch base again, you know, because this is a journey. It's a process. It's a cycle, like we've been saying all along. And it didn't feel quite right for us to just leave you as we shared all this information with you and then just said, you know, wish you well on your school year. That didn't seem quite right. So we want to be able to check back in with you. I see a question. What time are these? Yes, they will be. That's a great question. We have not nailed down the exact time yet because we want to be mindful of the time zone differences, but they are work days. You're exactly right. So we're going to make it. We're going to work to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, as far as an after school time potentially, but keeping in mind the span of time differences might make that a little difficult. So we'll have more information about that forthcoming, but we'll be doing the same thing that we did for this series, which is recording everything so that if the time isn't convenient for you, you'll still be able to watch. And we'll be for sure working on some ways to further increase engagement, other platforms, other methods, strategies, so that we can be sharing and communicating and collaborating outside of even just the sessions themselves. All of that is to come. So stay tuned on that. Okay. One additional resource I wanted to share with you that recently came to my attention and I thought was so perfectly timed was this book club that Paula Kluth is having on Facebook. And if you're not familiar with Paula Kluth, she's a wonderful, wonderful, nationally recognized sort of researcher and speaker on things like universal design for learning and inclusion and things like that. She is doing a book club on Facebook, Wednesdays in July. You can see the little screenshot here. Her theme, her topic is, don't we already do inclusion? 100 ideas for improving inclusive schools. So I felt like that really just went right along with everything that we've been talking about and wanted to make sure you had that information. So either you can click on the link that's in this slide here. It'll take you to Paula's Facebook page, or if you get on Facebook and just search for her name, you'll see that it's right at the top of her page. And she does mention on there, I think it's, it's related to one of her books, but you don't even have to read it if you don't want to, right? Just join the sessions to hear the conversation. So, and then of course, at the bottom there, don't forget our Inclusive Educator Toolbox that we have put together for you. Those resources will still be there in that link. And as part of moving forward with these follow-up sessions, we'll be looking at expanding those as well and having tabs for each stage of the framework with a variety of resources, articles, podcasts, videos, all sorts of things to try to give you as much information as possible in as many different formats as possible so that you can really find the things that are useful to you. So don't forget that that Inclusive Educator Toolbox is there. The link's on the slide, the link's on our website, and I'll make sure it's in our follow-up email as well. So here we are at the end of our time, and we have just a little over 15 minutes. We wanted to open it up for any questions that you have that haven't already been addressed, any lingering questions that we can answer sort of for the group. So it's really just this is truly an open time. We have no guiding questions for you right now. It's just any questions that are still sort of sticking in your mind. What questions do you have for us, either for us as the project success team or us as any questions specific to the stages of the framework, really anything. I see someone has asked for a link for the toolkit in the chat. Absolutely, we'll make sure that gets there. Will you go back to the previous slide? This one? There you go. There's the link for the toolbox there in the chat box. I'll say while I'm giving everyone a moment to sort of consider whether there are any questions rolling around, that also a piece that we are excited about in having these follow-up sessions is that hopefully, knowing that there were so many individuals who joined us this summer and that made things a little harder or just a little bit different to think through, hopefully you'll have some time once we return back to school that you can be reaching out to some people and maybe starting to get a team developed or even just a partner, right, to join you sort of with all of this, and then maybe they can join you in these follow-up sessions as well. So hopefully in between now and September, maybe you can bring some friends alongside you and make it a real team experience rather than individual. Yes, the two things that are due, you have until Monday, July 13th, and it's the vision statement and the inclusive action plan. Those are the two things that we really thought captured the essence of what will set you on a good path for implementing or expanding inclusive practices. If you've already submitted your documents, when will we hear back? Great question. We'll be going through and reviewing them more in detail. You can assume, I think, that they were received, but I can set up something where we can get a confirmation out to you to make sure that we've gotten them. And those will be things that we refer back to also in the follow-up sessions. We'll be able to look at your action plans, your vision statements, and sort of have those as discussion points moving forward. Is there a link for the action plan? It is on our website. It was in the follow-up emails. It was in the PowerPoint for the action plan template for you to be able to create your action plan, and then there's also a link for you to submit it. And if you have any trouble with submitting, I know some people have had some trouble submitting it in that link, just email it to us. That's fine too. Just know where to submit. Oh yeah, just email it. No problem. We'll make sure that we get it. We'll make sure that we get it. I see. Yes. Okay. I see someone emailed our project success email address. That's fine. That's fine. I would recommend emailing it directly to me just in case, but honestly, any email address that's connected with us will get it. Janet's looking for materials to share with gen ed teachers to help them work with special ed kids and how to modify their curriculum. Yeah, that's a huge piece. The modification piece is really something that can kind of stop people in their tracks, gen ed and special ed alike. We don't have any co-teachers because of budget cuts. Sure. So materials to support gen ed teachers. If anyone has suggestions, you can throw them in the chat box, but we'll make sure to kind of gather up some resources to share there as well. Oh, thank you, Julie. How do you join Paula's book club? It's on Facebook. So if you click on the link that's in the slide, it'll take you to her Facebook page, or if you're on Facebook, just log into Facebook and search for her name, Paula Kluth, and it'll be right on her page. Yeah, Meredith mentioned we'll absolutely gather some additional resources and include them in the follow-up email. If you submitted the action plan and want to revise, can you submit a revised action plan? Absolutely. I think that's great. Resend the follow-up email and links from the second session. I tell you what, in this follow-up email after this session today, I'll try to include everything that was pertinent for the whole series, just in case anyone's missing a piece. Almost all of it. I can't think of anything that's not. I think everything you need is on our website. So I hear in a second, we'll show you again the website address and then the place where you click to find the Summer Institute page. All of those things should be there. That might be the easiest, but I will make sure everything gets in the email as well. Slides, yes, the slides are on the website. And there'll be a link to the slides in the email as well. Is the toolkit set up in an Excel spreadsheet? Yes, it is currently as a Google Sheet, which is the Excel version, right, within Google, and that lets it be a shareable document. So it is set up sort of as in a spreadsheet format. Would love more info on how schools and districts are including their paras. Yes, that's a great question. If anyone has any experiences to share, that would be great. And I should say too, I didn't mention earlier, we'll be collecting sort of all of these questions and compiling them into a frequently asked questions document. I think we mentioned that in earlier sessions. So these are the kinds of questions that we can also get included in that frequently asked questions document with some additional resources and things like that. So great question. I know I missed one up here. Oops, where have I gone here? What else? What else? Okay. It's hard to say, but yeah, they definitely should be able to be in the gen ed setting with appropriate supports. Laura, you haven't answered if we need to submit Part A and Part B of the action plan. So what we are looking for is just the actual action plan itself. I think Part A might have been what we put on the assessing current practices template because it's Part A of the take action step. And if you want to share that with us, you definitely can, but what we're looking for is just the actual action plan template. The recordings, yeah, they'll be available, absolutely, because, how did I forget to mention this? Because we're going to be looking at also developing a facilitator's guide that goes along with this training series so that as a school or a district or whatever, if someone is interested in reviewing this as a group outside of this training series, the recordings will be available, and then all the templates, the engagement guide, all of that will be available, and then the facilitator's guide will be sort of guidance on how to work through it as a team on your own. So yes, the recordings will be available for longer. Yeah, I saw Meredith mentioned encouraging everyone to join our newsletter for updates. And she put the link in there. Definitely. Our newsletter has some events that are specific to Indiana, but it also is full of, resources and updates. That'll be one way for sure that you'll get additional information on the follow-up sessions as well. Mary put the evaluation form link in there again for anyone who's still needing it. Yeah, oh my gosh, what a great comment. I always want to do it right, quote unquote, as I think many teachers are inclined to do. Yes, I think that's definitely a teacher thing. But I feel this will be ever-changing process, maybe even going back to stage one at times. I agree. I feel like I need permission to keep going toward the end goal, but not to always be there with each child. Yes, if you need that permission, I'm giving it to you right now. There's no right way to do any of it. As long as you're moving forward, that's the right way. As small a step as it may be, as long as you then take another small step after that and keep moving forward, that's the right way to do it. That's a really, really good point. You have my full permission. I'm right there with you.
Ashley, Elena has asked to share something.
Okay. Let me scroll down to the bottom here and make sure. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, Elena, go ahead and share, and then we'll pick back up for anyone else commenting.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Elena.
Hi. I wanted to address the person who wrote about the autistic children in the classroom.
Okay.
And I wanted to comment because I had actually put that in my vision statement about the no bullying. I am a general education teacher. So the bottom line is, unfortunately, that's going to happen. And as the teacher, we have to address it right away. And then also you have to talk with the kids. And then with our SPED children, it's unfortunate because we also have SPED in my family. You have to also help them understand or deal with when people are mean, because it is unfortunate, but it is going to happen. So, and it's very difficult to deal with that and to help them deal with that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Elena. There's a lot going on there. But it's important to know that we're always trying to be somewhere in the middle, right? We don't want to completely shelter our students with needs, but we also don't want to just completely expose them to all elements with no supports, right? It's always a middle ground piece, but making sure that they have supports and in terms of how to address when there are going to be maybe some meannesses or some bullying going on around. Thank you. Here's a question. Will we be developing a directory of participants so we can consult with some experienced teachers implementing the inclusion program in their respective schools and states? I think that's a fantastic idea. We have a directory that is specific to Indiana, but we can absolutely look into either differentiating between Indiana and out of state or somehow pulling that together, because I think that's really key for you all to be able to connect to each other and learn from each other in the different areas. Absolutely. So that'll be another kind of stay tuned thing, but excellent idea. There's the newsletter sign up. Yeah, great point, Meredith. In Indiana, we have an organization called InSource that's sort of the statewide parent support network, but there may be something similar in your own states. That would be a great resource as well for some of those issues we were talking about. Really good point. All right. Any last questions? Of course, we will, as we usually do, we'll stay on here for a few extra minutes. So if you do have questions that you want to pose, feel free to do that, or you can always reach us via email. Let me just click back over here to, again, just to wrap up here, here's our website, again, projectsuccessindiana.com. And when you click on that resources tab in the upper right-hand corner, that takes you to all of our resources, but including the section where you can get to our regional trainings, which is what this was originally supposed to be. It was an Indiana regional training, and then COVID happened, and so we were able to expand it quite a bit, which has really been amazing. But again, this is where you can find really anything that you need: the PowerPoint slides, the engagement guide, the links to the recordings, any of the other templates, pre-activity, all the things should be listed there on that Summer Institute 2020 page. So you just select that from the drop down and click go. Yep. We're putting the website in the chat box again. projectsuccessindiana.com. You can Google Project Success, but you just have to make sure to include that Indiana piece on there as well to make sure you get to our website. There's a couple other Project Successes out there in the world. All right. We will stay on here for a few more minutes, but really thank you truly so much, everyone, for joining us and for committing to this 3 weeks. I think it's been a really powerful experience, and we've been so thrilled to learn from all of you and hear your experiences, and we really look forward to seeing where we go in this upcoming school year with the follow-up session. So any questions you have, any comments, concerns, suggestions, anything, first and foremost, please make sure you share on the evaluation form that I mentioned earlier, but also please always feel free to email us as well.
Ashley, a couple people have asked about, is there going to be a certificate from this? Once you turn in your 2 assignments, you will get your professional growth points.
Yeah, great question. The evaluation form again, someone will throw that link up in the chat box again for you, the evaluation form. Yes, so the idea is that if you've either participated in the webinars live or you've been watching the recordings and you've been doing the pre-activities, and then specifically those 2 documents that we mentioned, the vision statement and the action plan, and submitted those are going to be sort of the touch points for how we know to send out the professional growth points to you. So that'll come in the form of a certificate that says you've earned 12 professional growth points for the entire series, participating in the webinars, and then the time it took you to do all of those pre-activities. We really value that time and want to make sure that it's recognized in the form of those professional growth points. So yes, that will be coming out to you. It'll take us, so it'll be after that July 13th date, right? Because we're giving you till July 13th to get those 2 documents submitted. So you could receive your certificate sooner if you've already submitted those documents, but it will at least be the week of the 13th at the latest, I would say. What if our district does hours instead of points? I will make sure to specify on the certificate, it's essentially 1 point per hour, but I'll make sure to point that out so that it'll be 12 hours. Good question. I'm glad you guys seem to have been enjoying this and benefiting from it. This has really been one of the best training series we've done. It's been great to hear from so many of you. And I'm so excited to see to be able to continue with you into the school year and see how things go.
And please don't hesitate to email us with any questions you have before then.
Absolutely.